The year is 1912. Imagine a picturesque, prosperous town in the southwestern corner of Iowa. The town sits up on a gentle hill that the nomadic Native Americans called Pleasant View. The town is Villisca. Thanks in large part to the railroad, Villisca was a hub for commerce, manufacturing, social, and religious ideals in the region. It was an attractive and peaceful town. The surrounding land was made of fertile bottomlands, adding to the tranquility of the scene. Villisca was known for its exquisite churches, exceptional at the time for the variety of denominations welcomed, from Presbyterian to Methodist, Baptist, Christian Science, Catholic, and Adventist. There were beautiful parks and greenways. The residents enjoyed many civic events throughout the year, and it seemed like an idyllic, thriving small town. But on a dreary, rainy evening in June 1912, the town of Villisca would be changed forever. Residing in Villisca, there was a well-respected businessman named Joe Moore, who ran a local hardware store and a John Deere implement franchise. Joe Moore was well-liked in the community. He was married to Sarah, and they had 4 children between the ages of 5 and 11. Now, not everybody was thrilled at Joe's success with his hardware store. Before he opened it, he worked for Frank Jones, also an Iowa State Senator, at the Jones store for many years. The friction came when Joe quit working for Frank and opened up his own store, taking the lucrative John Deere franchise with him. But that wasn't Jones's only issue with Moore. One of the more persistent rumor mills claimed that Joe Moore was carrying on a secret affair with Frank Jones' daughter-in-law, Donna Bentley. Moore was seen on more than one occasion visiting Bentley, who was a teacher in Villisca. But to the non-gossips, the Moores were a happy couple, and Sarah even worked at the Presbyterian Church as a co-director of the Sunday school. Her 4 children were enrolled in the Sunday school, and on June 9th, 1912, they went to the Children's Day service, a celebration of the end of the school year. All 6 of the Moores went to the church that evening, accompanied by 2 of the neighbors' children, Lena and Ina Stillinger. As an added bonus, there was a visiting preacher, Reverend George Kelly, teaching at the celebration that night. Along with the other Sunday school children, the Moore and Stillinger children performed their speeches and gave their recitations to the assembled congregation. There was a social afterward, where everyone mingled until about 9:30 p.m. The Moores and the 2 Stillinger girls walked the 3 blocks back to the Moores' house to finish the evening off with milk and cookies before bedtime. Lena and Ina Stillinger spent the night with the Moores in the downstairs bedroom off of the parlor. Around 5 a.m. the next morning, the Moores' neighbor, Mary Peckham, went outside in her yard to hang up her laundry on the line. The Moore house seemed unusually quiet. By 7 a.m., Mrs. Peckham noticed that the Moore household, usually a hub of activity with 4 boisterous children, was still quiet. Between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., Mary went to the Moore's porch and knocked on the front door. She noticed that the door was locked from the inside. No response. She went to the backyard and let out the Moore's chickens. She returned to her house and immediately called Joe Moore's brother, Ross. Ross arrived shortly and tried to look in the window, but couldn't see anything. He knocked loudly and shouted to try to rouse anyone still sleeping inside. Still no answer. He used his key to unlock the front door and went inside. Mary stayed on the porch. Ross only went to one room off of the parlor, which was the downstairs bedroom. When he opened the door, he saw 2 bodies in bed with very large pools of blood soaked through their bedclothes. They were the bodies of Lena and Ina Stillinger. He returned to the porch and told Mary to call the sheriff. City Marshal Hank Horton arrived shortly thereafter, only to check the house and find that all 6 members of the Moore family, along with the 2 Stillinger girls, had been brutally murdered. Their skulls were crushed by an axe. All 8 people were still in their beds, attacked in their sleep. Joe Moore, age 43. Sarah Moore, age 39. Herman Moore, age 11. Catherine Moore, age 9. Boyd Moore, age 7. Paul Moore, age 5. Lena Stillinger, age 12. And Ina Stillinger, age 8. Lena Stillinger had apparently awakened and fought back because she had some defensive wounds. Although her bedclothes were raised above her waist, and she had no undergarments, there was no sign of sexual assault. All the victims' faces had been covered with bedclothes. One kerosene lamp, obviously disturbed and missing its chimney, was found near Joe Moore's body. Another lamp was also found, also missing its chimney, near the Stillinger children. There were deep gouge marks in the ceiling in the parents' room above the bed and in the children's room from the upswing of the axe. The axe belonged to Joe Moore and was found near the Stillinger girls' bodies. It had been hastily wiped, but blood still remained. All doors were found to still be locked. There was a part of a keychain found in the downstairs bedroom. Among the most bizarre evidence found at the crime scene, a slab of bacon wrapped in a dish towel left near the axe. Investigators also found a pan of bloody water and a plate of uneaten food left on the kitchen table. Word of this horrific scene spread quickly through the small, close-knit town. People showed up in droves to gawk at the scene. Law enforcement could not contain the crowd. It's estimated that well over 100 people went tromping through the Moore house, looking at the grisly, mangled bodies and handling the bloody items. The Villisca National Guard finally showed up around noon and cordoned off the area. The crime scene was finally secured. Over the next several weeks and months, the residents of Villisca began buying up guns, keeping watch at night in shifts, and replacing locks. They eyed their neighbors suspiciously, and everyone was considered a suspect. The suspicions led to strained and even terminated relationships throughout the community. But who could have committed such a horrific crime in this idyllic little town? At the time, fingerprinting was in its infancy, and DNA testing was a far-off forensic dream. A local druggist had even showed up with a camera to photograph the scene, but was turned away immediately. The importance of crime scene photos had not yet been realized. However, bloodhounds were sent out on June 11th. They tracked a scent down to the nearby Nottoway River, where they lost the trail. So were there any suspects then? From the very first day, several suspects came under intense scrutiny. The biggest and most obvious suspect was none other than state senator and former employer of Joe Moore, Frank Jones. Jones had plenty of motives, and everyone knew it. Rumors flew that if he didn't commit the murders himself, did he pay someone to do it? No formal charges were ever brought against him. But the crime did not go unnoticed outside of Villisca either. A Texas land agent and undercover agent for Burns Detective Agency in Kansas City, Detective James Wilkerson, had studied the case from the beginning because it closely resembled a case he had worked on in Kansas. He would become a voice in the investigation. When suspicions flew throughout the community, they first started blaming the crimes on transients and strangers. One such person, a Burlington Railroad worker named Andy Sawyer, was accused. His employer reported him to the authorities because he had some very peculiar habits. He slept with an axe and had an intense interest in the murders. The town sheriff detained Sawyer, but ultimately released him when it was discovered that he had been arrested for vagrancy in Osceola, Iowa, the night of the murders. Henry Moore, no relation to the victims, was a man who killed his mother and grandmother with an axe months after the Villisca murders. He was tried and convicted of killing his mother and grandmother and sentenced to life in prison. In May 1913, a federal investigator claimed he had solved the Villisca murders and 22 other axe murders across the country by blaming Henry Moore. Henry Moore was never officially charged with those claims. He did, however, serve 36 years of his sentence and was paroled in 1949. Sam Moyer was Joe Moore's brother-in-law. He had often threatened to kill Moore, but also had an alibi the night of the murders. He was discarded as a suspect. The visiting preacher at the Presbyterian Church the night of the Children's Day service, Reverend George Kelly, was also a suspect. He and his wife skipped town at 5:30 a.m., the morning after the murders. Kelly was informally described as a pervert. He had suffered a supposed mental breakdown as a teenager. He was ultimately arrested in 1914 for sending obscene materials through the mail. A woman had applied for a job he had posted for a secretary. He insisted that she work without clothes, which prompted her to tell the authorities. Kelly was convicted, and in lieu of jail, he was sent to the St. Elizabeth Hospital, a mental health facility in Washington, D.C. In 1917, he was arrested for the Villisca killings. Under extreme duress and hours of intense interrogation, he confessed to the police. He later recanted his confession. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second trial ended with his acquittal. William Blackie Mansfield was a suspected serial killer accused of killing his wife, child, in-laws, and similar axe murders in Powell, Kansas. Detective Wilkerson accused Frank Jones of hiring Mansfield to execute the Moore family. Wilkerson even suggested that Mansfield was a cocaine-addicted serial killer himself. Wilkerson convinced a grand jury to investigate Mansfield in 1916. The irony was that Mansfield had a solid alibi the night of the murders, and the charges were dropped. Mansfield then sued Wilkerson for defamation and was awarded more than $2,000. An immigrant, possibly from Germany, named Paul Mueller, was the suspect of a year-long manhunt for the murder of a family in West Brookfield, Massachusetts, in 1897. He was the subject of a 2019 book by Bill James and his daughter Rachel McCarthy James, called The Man from the Train. In the book, the Jameses compared crime scenes from about 60 unsolved murders over 10 or so years in 14 separate incidents that included Colorado Springs, Colorado, Howell, Kansas, and Villisca, Iowa. The serial killer selected families that lived near railroad tracks, which is how he traveled. He struck around midnight and used the blunt side of an axe. There were many more similarities between Villisca and the other crime scenes. But through all the leads generated and all the suspects questioned, the Villisca Axe Murders are still unsolved to this day. And so it goes. The dark cloud of that 1912 grisly axe murder still looms heavy on the once idyllic, picturesque town of Villisca. My name is Scott, and thank you so much for watching. We're a group of curious and passionate humans, creating documentary-style content for those who share our curiosity, ask questions, and seek to dig deeper in a world where almost everything isn't quite what it seems. We are Mystery Syndicate. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, leave a comment, and give this video a like. And to be notified when we post new videos, hit that notification bell. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Patreon. And for exclusive merchandise and our blog, visit our website at www.mysterysyndicate.com. From all of us at Mystery Syndicate, thank you again. We sincerely appreciate your support.